I'm going to show you how to make the coffee placemat from Kreative Kiwi. For this I'm going to be using a 5x7 hoop, 2 layers of washaway stabiliser, a selection of threads, one with a matching bobbin and thread for the satin stitching, my squizzers, masking tape, some pins with heads on to anchor my stabiliser in the hoop, and my fabrics and batting cut to size. Start off by hooping your 2 layers of washaway stabiliser, and then you're going to pin around the top edge of your inner hoop. So take your pin, lay it on your inner hoop, push it through the stabiliser, and then bring it back round and through, and do that on all 4 sides. Load file coffee 1 into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 1, and that's going to give you your placement outline. I've loaded a matching bobbin and thread for the satin stitch into my machine, and I'm going to use that throughout the whole of this hooping. We're now going to put your backing fabric on, so turn your hoop over, place your fabric over the outline, and then tape it in place. Next you're going to place your batting over the outline as well, and tape that in place too. Pop your hoop into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 2 to secure them. I like to trim my batting up before I put my fabrics down, so I'm going to do that now. Take your first fabric and place it over the top box here, and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch colour number 3 to secure it. We're now going to trim up this along this edge here, some of the excess fabric to reduce the bulk. Place your next fabric over this outline here and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 4. You're going to do the same again here, trim up a little bit of the excess to reduce the bulk. You're now going to add your third fabric. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 5. Once more, trim up the excess here. Place your fabric over the last box and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 6. We're now going to trim up all the excess fabric from both front and back of the hoop. So turn your hoop over. Making sure you've got your matching bobbin and thread loaded into your machine for the border. You're now going to stitch round number 7, and that's going to zigzag this edge here. We're now going to stitch round number 8, and that's going to satin stitch all down the joins and around this edge here. We're now going to remove this from the hoop, so turn your hoop over and trim around the edge. We're now going to trim up around this edge just to make sure that it's nice and neat, and we cut close to the stitch line as possible without cutting it. That's because this is going to be our join. And we're going to do the same for the ends. And that's our first part of the outer frame finished. We can now set this aside for the minute. Load the file Coffee 2 into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 1, and that's going to give you a placement outline as it did before. You're now going to add your backing fabric, so turn your hoop over and place it over the outline. Then you're going to tape it in place. Pop your batting over the outline on the front and tape that in place as well. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2 to secure them. Trim away your excess batting. We're now going to work from bottom to top, so place your fabric over the bottom outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3. Trim up the excess along here. Place your second fabric over this outline here and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 4. Trim up the excess from around this stitch line here. Then place your fabric over the third outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 5 to secure it. Trim up the excess from along this stitch line and then place your last fabric over this area here and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 6. We're now going to trim up the excess fabric from both back and front of the hoop, so turn your hoop over. We're now going to join the two pieces of our frame together. We're going to stitch this top part first and then afterwards the bottom, but I'm going to secure them to the hoop together. You're going to sit this stitch line here on top of this stitch line here, and this one here on top of this line here. And then pin it in place, keeping your pins right out of the way of the stitch line. And the same for this side. and I'm going to add a little bit of tape just to hold those edges down on the stabiliser. You're now going to pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 7, and that's going to zigzag along this stitch line to join the two pieces together. You're now going to stitch round number 8, and that's going to zigzag all the way round to the next join. And now colour number 9, which is the zigzagging along this last join. Making sure you've got your matching bobbin and thread loaded into your machine for your border, you're now going to stitch round number 7, and that's going to satin stitch over all the rest of the joins and the outside edge. That's the stitching of the frame finished, so we can now free this from the hoop, so turn your hoop over and trim around the edge of the stitch line, taking care not to cut it. We're now just going to trim around here to make sure that it's all nice and neat, ready to join this to our next piece. And that's our second hooping complete, and we can now set it aside. We're now going to create the centre for our frame to sit around. I've chosen file A for this, which says all you need is love and good coffee. There are several choices, files A to E, so pick whichever one that you want to do. It will be done in exactly the same way, with maybe fewer colour changes or maybe more, depending on what's on the front. Once you've got your chosen file, you're then going to hoop and pin your 2 layers of wash away stabiliser. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 1 to give you your batting placement outline. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2 to secure it. I will be trimming up my batting before I add my fabric. In the instructions you're instructed to put your batting and front fabric down. You're more than welcome to do that, or you can do as I will, and that is to place your batting down, stitch colour 2, remove your hoop, then you'll trim up your batting, then you'll place your fabric down over the top of the batting and stitch round number 2 a second time to secure your fabric. The choice is entirely yours. I'm now going to load my hoop into my machine and stitch round number 2. So I've set my machine back to colour number 2 again, ready to secure my fabric. I'm now going to trim up my excess batting. If you don't know how to skip through colours back and forth on your machine, I would suggest you look at your user manual or try and find a video on your machine on YouTube. It's a really useful thing to know how to do. Place your front fabric over the outline and then tape it in place. And now stitch round number 2 once more. Load whichever colour you want for the quilting into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 3. Load your thread colour for the first part of the wording in your machine, and I've got all you need and good, and then you're going to stitch round number 4. Next is the contents of the coffee pot, so load whichever colour you want for the coffee into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 5. Load your thread colour for the coffee pot itself into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 6. Load your thread colour for the swirls, the word love and coffee into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 7. You're now going to add your backing fabric, so turn your hoop over, lay it over the top and tape it in place. Load whichever colour bobbin and thread you're going to have for the satin stitching around the edge after the frame's been added on, and then you're going to stitch round number 8 to secure your backing. Trim up the excess fabric from both front and back of your hoop, so turn your hoop over. We're now going to join the frame to the centre. You want to line this stitch line here up onto this stitch line here, and I'm going to pin mine in place. So work out where your 2 ends need to be, and then pin right out of the way of the stitch line. The stitch line is going to actually be on top of this stitch line here. You're happy with the positioning of your frame, you're then going to stitch round number 9, and that's going to join everything together. Check your join, and if you're happy with it, you're then going to stitch round number 10, and that's going to complete the satin stitch border around the frame. If you're not happy with your join, unpick it, realign it and stitch colour 9 again. It's well worth taking the time to line everything up properly. Make sure you've got your matching bobbin and thread loaded into your machine, and then stitch round number 10. And that's your placemat all stitched. We're now going to free this from the hoop, so turn your hoop over, and taking care not to cut anything on the front of your hoop, we're now going to free this from the hoop on the back. All that remains for us to do now is to remove all the excess stabiliser from around the edges and on the back. So with the warm water and a cotton bud, dip it in and wipe it around the edge. And that's our placemat complete. I hope you enjoyed this stitch along. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of new videos as soon as they're published. Do pop along to Kreative Kiwi's Facebook group. There's lots of ideas, help and inspiration there for everybody. And thank you very much for joining me. You'll find a link to this design and lots of other information including discount codes in the video description below.